What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Cleveland Browns pregame tailgate show. I am your host, Sean Stevenson, and it is week 16, and the Cleveland Browns are in a prime position to finally clinch themselves a playoff berth this week. The Cleveland Browns are now in New Jersey at MetLife Stadium in East Rutherford, New Jersey for the New York Jets game. It is week 16. The last time these two teams met up, the Browns won 23-3 last season in week 2. And the Browns have a prime opportunity to really continue to set the narrative that they are a playoff team. The Browns are currently sitting at 10-4, having the 13th ranked offense and the 16th ranked defense. Within that offense, the fifth best rushing attack in NFL, and the 23rd passing attack in the league in terms of passing yardage. But looking at what Baker Mayfield has done so far in the past few weeks, this offense is really starting to click. But there will be a shortage of some talent along the Browns' offensive roster today, especially that starting lineup. They will be up without two starting offensive linemen within Wyatt Teller and also Jedrick Wills. So you can expect Nick Harris, the rookie out of Washington, who was drafted in the 5th round, to come in and step into that starting lineup. The reason why you expect Nick Harris to be coming in because Chris Hubbard was lost for the rest of the season with the injury last week. So Nick Harris will be the one likely be taking multiple snaps. And then also looking at that left tackle position, Kendall Lamb will be the player that's going to step in and have some big plays for that offensive line. Now, I'm Sean Stevenson. I'm the host of the Cleveland Browns Tailgate Show. You guys can give me a follow on social media. That's at SHWN Stevenson on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter. Now, as we get into the show, again, looking at the Cleveland Browns, this is a group that's going to be missing a lot of talent across the board. Look at the fact that they're going to be missing up to 5 receivers in this matchup. No Jarvis Landry, no Rashard Higgins, no Kadero Hodge, Donovan Peoples-Jones. Those players are all going to be out on the COVID reserve list, which is going to be a huge problem, at least in terms of the long-term future. Now, looking at the matchup against the New York Jets, this is potentially something that they should be able to overcome, especially since the fact that the New York Jets, winning last week against the Los Angeles Rams, did lose the number 1 pick in the process. So yes, you win a game, potentially have the ability to go 1-15, but you're still stuck with the number 2 pick because the Jaguars, having a more difficult schedule, they win that tiebreaker in terms of record, and they now have the number 1 pick in the situation that they don't win in one of the next 2 games that they have. Looking at the Jets, 32nd ranked offense, 28th ranked defense. Overall, just not a very good squad. They're missing talent across the board, and then also just with them firing defensive coordinator Greg Williams, there's still a lot of changes that are going with this team. You look at the fact that Greg Williams was a relatively aggressive coach, someone that liked to keep discipline around that roster, and you look at head coach Adam Gase, very different personalities and what they like to do. And Adam Gase has had, some issues when it comes to his ability to lead players and to lead a locker room. You look at his time in Miami, wasn't the greatest. Now he goes over to the New York Jets, and the franchise has continued to be essentially a dumpster fire in a situation that they haven't been able to get complete control and have a solid plan within their rebuild. You look at the fact that back in 2018, they drafted Sam Darnold at the top of the draft, the same year that the Browns drafted Baker Mayfield. And in midst of dysfunction in both franchises, including the Browns and the Jets, Baker Mayfield has been the player to find success, even with the changing of head coaches and offensive coordinators. But the same cannot be said about Sam Darnold. But that's something that we'll get into later in the show. Looking at the injury report, again, the Browns are going to be missing a lot of players in terms of the reserve COVID list. But in terms of the actual injury report, who's going to be out related to injury, right guard Wyatt Teller is going to be out for another game as he continues to deal with an ankle injury. Early in the season, he did miss some snaps in some games because of a calf injury. Now it's been an ankle injury over the past few weeks. And then also linebacker Malcolm Smith, he's listed as questionable with the hamstring injury. Now, Malcolm Smith is going to be it's very important that Malcolm Smith plays just because of the fact that they're already missing their Mike linebacker and BJ Goodson, who's on the reserve COVID list. And then he joins also linebacker Jacob Phillips on the reserve COVID list. They are both listed as high-risk contacts, along with Rashard Higgins, Kadero Hodge, Jarvis Landry, and Donovan Peoples-Jones. So you're looking at the fact that you're missing your top 4 wideouts, you're missing 2 of your top starting offensive linemen, and you're missing 2 of your top line. Well, I would say really 1 of your top linebackers, but you're looking at Jacob Phillips as potentially someone that could provide depth in the situation that Goodson or Michael Smith is unable to go. Now you look at more significant time for Sione Takitaki. In that situation, you want to see Sione Takitaki be able to step up and really give you solid minutes out on the field, because really most of his success has come in the run game, and he still has a lot to prove in terms of his passing coverage ability. So this may be a prime opportunity to do so, with the Jets having the 32nd ranked passing attack. Also, this puts a little bit more stress on the secondary, seen by the fact that you're missing up to 3 players potentially in that second level in that linebacking core. So you want to see people like Denzel Ward, Kevin Johnson, and Terrence Mitchell step up and to really play to their max potential in this matchup. Looking at the Jets, they're also missing some players as well heading into this matchup. Most likely, cornerback Javelin Godry. He is dealing with a knee injury. He's listed as doubtful. And then also receiver Jeff Smith is listed as questionable with a shoulder injury. Now, Javelin Godry is their starting slot cornerback. So it'd be interesting to see if he is in the game, what kind of situation they deal with in a situation that knee does flare up, since he's listed as doubtful. And then also, they're not really trying to win games in New York. So it's going to be highly unlikely that he plays, given the knee injury, and then him playing significant snaps on this defense. They may try to look to keep him healthy as much as possible heading into next season. Looking at their depth chart, again, this is a team that isn't really trying to win too many games. They're trying to first understand what do they have within Sam Darnold, quarterback that they just drafted 3 seasons ago. In that situation, Sam Darnold has had some questionable play throughout his season, and also just issues with health. I believe it was 2 seasons ago where he missed about 4 or 5 games from mono. And then also they do have Joe Flacco, who they signed in the offseason. Running back Frank Gore and Ty Johnson will be the starting duo in the backfield. You look at the fact that Frank Gore has been able to play almost 15 years, or more than 15 years actually, is quite insane. And the man is the true definition of Iron Man in the NFL. Frank Gore has been doing it for a long time. He's been doing it at a high level and been successful. It'll be interesting to see, how long he can continue this sustainability of being an NFL running back, whether it be a starter on a bad team or just being a rotational guy on a contender. Either way, it is very great to see Frank Gore still be doing it at such a long time and longevity within the NFL. And the guy definitely, based off of his resume, is going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. Looking at the receiver position, you look at Jamison Crowder and Brashard Perriman as really your starting 2. Jamison Crowder is going to be that slot receiver for the Jets. And then Denzel Mims, a player that they like to use on the outside. Also, they do have Braxton Berrios, another good inside slot player that they can use to attack the interior and middle parts of the field. Looking at the tight end position, they do have Chris Herndon and Ryan Griffin, 2 solid tight ends, especially in the receiving game, that can make a couple plays when having the ball thrown their way. Looking at their offensive line, this has definitely been a group that has struggled immensely, but they have had one bright spot along that offensive line, which has been left tackle Mekhi Becton, who they drafted this year. Now, many of you remember there was a lot of tackles taken at the top of the draft. Look at last week playing against the New York Jets. Andrew Thomas, the first tackle taken off the board. Also, the Browns taking Jedrick Wills, who's likely going to be out for this game. The Jets took Mekhi Becton right after, and then later in the draft, Tristan Wirfs out of Iowa went to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who just clinched up a playoff berth yesterday after blowing out the Detroit Lions. Looking at the rest of the offensive line on the interior, they do have at guard Pat Eflin, Connor McGovern, and Josh Andrews. As you can see right there, their pass blocking grades according to PFF are extremely low. So let's hope that in terms of the defensive line on the interior, they're able to get some pressure on a quarterback alongside Sheldon Richardson, who's been playing very good, which has been very needed towards the end of this season as the matchups became a little bit less friendly for a shorthanded Browns secondary, which is starting to get healthy on the back end, especially given the fact that they've got Ronnie Harrison back off of injured reserve, which is going to be huge, especially heading into the playoffs. And then lastly, they have George Fant at that right tackle spot. Looking at the defensive line, they do have Henry Anderson, John Franklin Myers, and Florenzo Fatukasi at the front three defensive line position. They do run a typical 3-4. At outside linebacker, you expect Frankie Lavulu and Terrell Basham to be those two outside linebackers. And then on interior at that second level, they have Bryce Hager and Neville Hewitt. And then in the secondary, this is, again, a group that is just short-handed, unfortunately, for that team. Blessuan Austin is going to be that starting corner. Bryce Hall and then Lamar Jackson out of Nebraska. And then some of you do remember that we do have a Lamar Jackson on our team as well. But that is going to be out of Oklahoma State. And then looking at the back end of their secondary, Marcus May, a player that they drafted a couple years ago out of the second round, pretty talented, strong safety. He's the captain of that defense, especially on the back end. And then Arthur Mullet is a defensive back that they had moved to free safety last week, which really helped in terms of them finding success against the Los Angeles Rams. Again, the Cleveland Browns are on the road facing off against the New York Jets in MetLife Stadium. This is going to be a 1 o'clock kickoff. The Cleveland Browns Tailgate Show is sponsored by Focus Clothing. Focus Clothing is a small Black-owned apparel company in Cleveland. Check out their new Friends Focus logo, both in black and white pullover, available now. You can shop today at FocusClothingCLE.com. Again, that is FocusClothingCLE.com. So looking at the quarterbacks, Mayfield versus Darnold, obviously this was a comparison that we were expecting to, last a lifetime, or at least their lifetime in the NFL, just because they were drafted in the same draft class, but also that these were two players that were compared a lot in this draft class as potential options for the Browns. Many of you may remember teams were saying that the Browns should draft Saquon Barkley #1 and then potentially grab Sam Darnold or Baker Mayfield. Looking at John Dorsey, what he decided to do, the Baker Mayfield and Nick Chubb picks are working out excellently. Unfortunately for John Dorsey, he's no longer with this franchise based off some decisions of hiring Freddie Kitchens. But looking at the quarterbacks, Baker Mayfield this season has definitely done an amazing job in terms of growing his confidence, growing fans' belief in him as a franchise quarterback, and really showing that over the past few weeks as he's got more comfortable within this offense. Currently, he's graded at 82.0. That's 13th highest, and then 81.6 passing grade, all according to Pro Football Focus, which is his 11th highest of all quarterbacks. And the best thing about Baker Mayfield this season is that he's really shown his ability to limit turnovers compared to the past two seasons. Really, his second year is the biggest thing that we wanted to look at. During his time in Oklahoma, Baker Mayfield really was able to throw the ball with success and do it at a high level. That was something that we really wanted to see that he showcased throughout his time in Oklahoma, where he won a Heisman Trophy. It really just showed that ability to throw the ball at all three levels with accuracy, with time, and then also to be able to be a leader and really command the offense that can offer a lot of production. Early in the season, Baker Mayfield kind of struggled. You could tell he wasn't that comfortable with the playbook yet. But as the weeks went on, they allowed the run game to be the foundation of this offense. And then Baker Mayfield really was able to find some success throwing the ball as the season progressed, and he understood what type of reads he should make within this offense. As that's been going through, his offensive grading has increased on a weekly basis, and the Browns offense has really been able to benefit from the play of Baker Mayfield, because now teams are no longer able to just put 8 men in a box, try to limit the run as much as possible, because Baker Mayfield's confidence was not there yet. Now with things starting to turn over, you can feel that the Browns are really starting to mold themselves into that team that can do it all in terms of offense because of what Baker Mayfield offers in terms of the passing game and his ability to become a threat and be a threat on a weekly basis against any team in the matchup, especially because of the game plan that head coach Kevin Stefanski is able to implement with Baker Mayfield under center. On the flip side, you look at Sam Darnold, and this is a player that hasn't really lived up to the hype of being a franchise quarterback. One of the biggest things with him is the fact that, he deals with injury. He can be turnover prone and just really make some bad plays. Even during his time at USC, there were some questions about his intangibles to really be a leader. They believed that he could throw the ball, but there were too many situations in which he either turned the ball over too soon, or in different cases where he was just unable to really show a consistency in his ability to deliver the ball in the right spot, or understanding, when not to throw the ball into questionable areas, whether it be double coverage against zone, or really being able to throw receivers open on a consistent basis. Sam Darnold was a player that was potentially mocked to the Browns a lot prior to them drafting Baker Mayfield number one overall. And obviously they still have some belief in him, but really those beliefs are starting to go down more and more each season, especially with the fact that he's graded lower and lower in terms of offensive and passing grades in the NFL, according to Pro Football Focus. And then really just through the eye test, the Jets really haven't been able to find any consistency in terms of the organization. And I definitely believe that Sam Darnold has been one of those players that has kind of drawn the short end of the stick because of what or lack of ability to build a strong organization around him. And that's really, negatively impacted him, because when you start to deal with a lot of internal dysfunction, it begins to work its way throughout the locker room and across the roster. Them not really having the strongest receiver core or a consistent run game. Those have really been two issues. They did throw some money at Le'Veon Bell in the 2 off seasons ago, but that didn't work. He was released this offseason, now playing with the Kansas City Chiefs. And just overall, the franchise has really just imploded. And now they're in a situation where they thought that drafting Trevor Lawrence in this upcoming draft, that could have been one of the situations that helped turn this offense around and for them to find some consistency. But you look at last week, they beat the Los Angeles Rams and knocked themselves out of number 1 spot. And now you're no longer at a guarantee to draft Trevor Lawrence, who has been arguably, labeled as the best quarterback prospect since Andrew Luck. And in that situation, now you're looking at a couple quarterbacks, whether it be potentially a Kyle Trask or a Justin Fields as a quarterback to potentially replace Sam Darnold, or in a situation that now you add a dominant running back or a receiver threat, or you trade down from that number 2 spot potentially, and then you get a big draft haul and try to put more pieces around Sam Darnold, just because you could potentially have 2 more years, with him having that 4th year and then that 5th year option that's available next offseason. But these are questions that have to be answered. And if Sam Darnold really wants to have that longevity within this franchise and really say that I can turn this franchise around, it really begins with his play on a weekly basis and his ability to help galvanize a roster when it's very much needed. Because, again, the Jets have been another organization that suffered from dysfunction. They really haven't been good since the last playoff that they made, where LaDainian Tomlinson and Sean Green were the starting running backs, where Mark Sanchez was the quarterback fresh out of college, again, coming from USC. And it just hasn't, turned into replicated success on a seasonal basis. So Sam Darnold, again, is a quarterback that has struggled due to dysfunction, but he's also a player that, was drafted high, still has a couple years left on his contract, but based off his play and his lack of availability, those could be determining factors of why the Jets could determine and decide to move on next offseason and potentially be in the running for Trevor Lawrence and or Justin Fields. Now, when I look at Baker Mayfield, again, he has been the more successful quarterbacks of the two. And really one of the things that has to be, analyzed and brought up is the fact that Baker Mayfield has been able to turn his season around and so quickly. Early in the year, he did have some struggles against some top tier competition, had to deal with some weather. But really, the biggest issue is that the Browns weren't throwing the ball a lot. He had multiple games where he had under 25 passing attempts. He was near the bottom quarter of the league in terms of Pro Football Focus grading, also yardage, and then really just QBR. But there were some situations. You look at the Giants game, excuse me, not the Giants, the Bengals game, the Cowboys game, early in the Colts game, and then he just had a poor second half. And then it was really a few weeks after the bye week, once the weather started to clear up, really that biggest transition point was the Jacksonville game, in which Baker Mayfield was able to really just flip this season around. Now you look at what he's been able to do, being in the top 15 in terms of Pro Football Focus grading, near the top 10 in pass grading, and really just his command of offense has been spectacular. How he's been able to really find success, especially off the play action and getting out of the pocket, has been the thing that has really helped turn his season around. Baker Mayfield really has found most of his success on those bootlegs, on those speed outs, on those design rollout plays that Kevin Stefanski has employed, throughout different ways for this, for this team. And while he's been able to do that, it's really been able to, flip this team and this offense and what they're trying to do on a weekly basis. Typically, when you face the Browns early in the year, it was pretty obvious. They were going to run the ball a lot with Nick Chubb, have Kareem Hunt spell him, and limit what Baker Mayfield had to do in terms of throwing the ball. And that was really until he got comfortable within this offense. Once he got comfortable in this offense, pretty much the sky has been the limit on a weekly basis with Baker Mayfield under center. You look at the fact that he's been able to change what has really worked for this offense, establish that confidence within the coaching staff, the offensive coordinator, what they were trying to do in terms of getting the ball down the field, and really utilize Baker Mayfield's arm talent. You look at the fact that he's been able to throw the ball on a consistent basis, pretty much prior to that Philadelphia Eagles game, all the way through this point of week 16, and really do it with a higher level of success each week. Jacksonville was really that starting point of, we're going to have a game and start this game off with Baker Mayfield and allow him to set the momentum with this team. We all know what the Browns have in terms of their running back duo in Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. Now it was time for Baker Mayfield to establish what he could do within his offense and really help change things around. Now you're in a situation where Baker Mayfield can throw the ball on a weekly basis, really grow within this offense, be able to attack downfield and put pressure on the third level of that secondary. And pretty much any matchup, Baker Mayfield no longer is that player that can just be targeted, as why the Browns have had limited success, within throwing the ball or being able to have long sustained drives, because the running game was really that only consistent factor that the offense was able to get on a weekly basis. So again, I want to thank you guys for joining me for the Cleveland Browns Tailgate Show. We are having some slight technical difficulties over on Facebook, so we're just going to take a short intermission to get that stream back up on Facebook, and we'll get right back into it. Again, I want to thank you guys for joining me on the Cleveland Browns Tailgate Show. Alrighty, we are back. We were able to change the stream around over on Facebook, so we're gonna hop right back into it. Again, you guys can follow me on social media at SHWN Stevenson, and I would like to again thank you for joining me for the Cleveland Browns Tailgate Show. We're gonna hop right back into it, and we're going to discuss. Go ahead. And we're going to continue to discuss Baker Mayfield and really will he be able to find some success this week, missing his top wideouts, and potentially what if there's a situation where the Browns are unable to have some of their top wideouts because of continued positive COVID tests in terms of the receiving corps. And I do believe that Baker Mayfield will be able to find some success, especially going against this Jets defense that's already missing some players on the back end of their secondary. And really just, again, they're in a situation where they're not really trying to win too many games because they would further worsen their draft stock, which they've already done, missing out on the number one pick from winning that Los Angeles Rams game. Now, Baker Mayfield is going to be without Jarvis Landry, Rashard Higgins, Kadero Hodge, Donovan Peoples-Jones, basically those top four wideouts on this team. And then again, not to mention that he's going to be missing two players along that offensive line in Wyatt Teller and then also Jedrick Wills. So in that situation, you're going to find a much different offense than what we've seen over the past few weeks because you have to be able to adjust your offensive game plan based off of whatever personnel is really on the field. Now you're going to look at more significant snaps, most likely from Taywan Taylor, who did come in the game a couple weeks ago, but had a pretty bad drop. So he's going to be giving more opportunities on offense this week. Marvin Hall, a player that they had signed off of waivers who played with Detroit most of the season, he's now going to have to be a player that steps up as he's going to be pretty much shoved into the starting lineup. You also have Derek Willis. Derek Willis is a player that played with the Browns last year, had a big play to help win a game. Obviously, he wasn't re-signed to a contract this offseason, but having him on the practice squad, he is a player that is at least familiar with the organization and should have slight familiarity with the offensive game plan just because of the fact that he's been on the practice squad. And then really, you're going to see a big change because of the involvement of the tight ends within this offense. And really, the biggest thing is going to be establishing the run game, which we believe that the Browns should do and have done throughout the season. But really, it comes down to how different this passing game is going to look. When you really, analyze and review what this offense has done over the past few weeks, it's really been play action centric and getting the ball down the field. Rashard Higgins, they've been in contract extension talks over the past few weeks, really because of what he's been able to do with Baker Mayfield and his ability to get open down the field and have that chemistry. Now, when you look at the fact that you're missing really your top three players in terms of who's been able to play that role of someone that's able to have that deep shot on play action and then that underneath receiver within Jarvis Landry, now you look at a potentially quick tempo passing offense. Now, that could include a little bit more West Coast style of offense where Baker Mayfield's getting the ball out of his hands quickly. Again, having that play action centric offense and that emphasis on really the marriage of the run and the pass, it's going to be a lot different when you have a quarterback that's typically holding on the ball a lot longer and you're also missing two offensive linemen in your starting lineup. Now, in that situation, when you decide to use some RPO, some quick tempo passing, Baker Mayfield is likely going to be getting the ball out of his hands quickly. So expect a lot of screens, slants, drags, hitches, a lot of simple offensive concepts just to really help mitigate some of the loss that you have on the outside at the receiver position. And it really just comes down to, how long are these players actually going to be out? In a situation that you have to go against the Pittsburgh Steelers next week and you're out, say, Jarvis Landry, Rashard Higgins, or Donovan Peoples-Jones, now you're putting a little bit more pressure on that tight end group to perform and really get the most out of that group. And, the receivers have been improving on a weekly basis, but you had some inconsistencies within that tight end room. You look at David Njoku as a player that really is a move tight end that can make plays over the intermediate parts of the field. He may be a player that now you can flex out into, a slot or outside wide and try to get more mismatches against linebackers. Also, you look at Harrison Bryant, who's more of an H-back type of tight end, but they believe is the best route runner on that team. He may be a player that you now flex out wide a little bit more and try to get more out of that tight end group. And then really that comes down to, how much will the tight ends be part of this game plan? Austin Hooper is getting back healthy. We've already kind of discussed David Njoku and Harrison Bryant and what they offer to this team. But really now it comes back to that situation of the tight end group has to perform yet again. The last time they were really in that situation where the tight end group really had to step up was when Austin Hooper was out due to that appendectomy. Now, in that situation, Harrison Bryant stepped up big time. He had 2 touchdowns. David Njoku also had a score. Now, you look at the fact that all 3 of your tight ends are there, and you're going against a team that, doesn't have the greatest defense. They're 27th ranked unit, so they obviously can be beat. Now, you really have to prove that your tight ends are a group that can really take over a game based off the game plan you want to implement. Now, in a situation that the quick tempo passing is what you really need in order for your receivers to find some success, just because of their lack of experience within this offense. Now, your tight ends who have been there the entire season have to really impact the game in the facet of throwing the ball, rather it be getting down the field and opening up the seam and open up the play action passing down the field using your tight ends. Harrison Bryant underneath has been one of those things where they like to use the play action, have him escape out into the flat, and then really just use that yak ability, yards after catch, for him to get down the field. Austin Hooper, throughout his career, has been that player that has been able to find the soft spots within zones. So there's a strong possibility that we're going to see a lot of 13 personnel with 3 tight ends on the field because of the lack of receivers that you have. Now, in the situation that they're in that 13 personnel, now you look at Marvin Hall as potentially being that number 1 receiver out there on the field because he's been around the active roster for so long. Now, Derek Willis, another big body receiver. You could see some situations where they're in and run blocking well on the outside. But again, those tight ends are going to be, the players that really impact the passing attack as well. And then also don't be surprised if we see some 22 personnel where you have 2 running backs and then 2 tight ends on the field at the same time, whether that be out of shotgun or you have situations where Kareem Hunt is flexed out wide as a wide receiver or in the slot, because he's also a player that can be very dominant in terms of creating mismatches against the defense in terms of the passing game because of his route running nuance and his ability to get open in terms of the pass game. So, now you look at the situation of, can the Browns overcome COVID-related issues in the playoffs? In a situation that, you get some positive tests, now you're really starting to question how successful can the Browns be in terms of, being competitive in a playoff matchup. In a situation that, say if they lose a game and a team steps up into that 5th spot, now you're potentially going against the Buffalo Bills. That's a very tough matchup if you're missing some receivers or a linebacker or potentially offensive lineman, defensive lineman. If the Browns have another week like this week where numerous players are out due to COVID, that's going to be very tough to overcome in terms of the playoff matchup. The Browns are already a team that a lot of the media decides to really downplay in terms of what they could actually be because of the schedule that they've played. Yes, they have had the 4th easiest schedule up to this point in the NFL, but regardless of the fact, you can only play who's on your schedule. And in that situation, the Browns really have to be able to, have the depth on their roster to really play at the highest level, regardless of who's out there. Now, would I say the Browns will be at a major disadvantage if any of their starters or multiple starters are out because of COVID tests and have to be placed on a reserve list prior to a playoff matchup? I definitely believe that. But in that situation, that now comes down to the defensive coordinator in Joe Woods, offensive coordinator Alex Van Pelt, and head coach Kevin Stefanski, and understanding this is what we have in terms of our personnel. How can we manipulate our game plan to find success, in that matchup? Now, there's been, previous instances with the Baltimore Ravens where they had numerous positive COVID tests, and the NFL did everything possible to rework their game. They went from a Sunday to a Monday to a Tuesday to a Wednesday afternoon because, their quarterback, their receivers, their running backs, they had numerous players that were on that reserve COVID list, and they really worked around the season for the Baltimore Ravens. Do the Browns have that same reserve and that same respect from the NFL front office in terms of multiple COVID tests in the playoff matchup? That's something that remains to be seen. But in that situation that the Browns kind of deal with similar, number of players and really significant impact starters in a playoff matchup, should the Browns be given some of that same courtesy? I would hope so. But over the years, the Browns haven't really got the marquee favorable respect from the front office, especially the commissioner, Roger Goodell. So, it remains to be seen what they're going to do. But in the situation that the Browns do have similar COVID issues as they are dealing with this week, then it would be really tough to, overcome that and win a playoff matchup. Now, what are some things that Kevin Stefanski could do to minimize some high-risk contacts? This is a difficult question to be answered, and a question that many people want to see be answered. Now, if we're just being honest, in the NFL, you're still dealing with grown men. At the end of the day, they're going to do what they want. They're going to really decide, if I want to go out, I will. You look at the NBA players when they were in a bubble where they couldn't even go anywhere, and players were still able to leave out, and do whatever. Now you look at the situation that the holidays just passed, where, other people around, family members, and there's extended risk of potentially having a positive COVID test. And then it really comes down to how restrictive are organizations allowed to be in terms of what they allow their players to do. Can they really mandate you only can be around your family? And, how much can they really enforce that? Then in the situation that you do mandate limited contact with outside people beside your family or people within the organization, and then, of course, the minimum has to be limited contact with people inside the building as well to minimize any high-risk contacts. But really, it comes down to the players. Who are you around that could potentially be listed as a high-risk contact with COVID? Obviously there are situations where you have false positives, and then you have to continue to take tests in order to still play in the game the same week. If you have a positive test, that's considered a false positive. But in a situation like now, we have high risk contacts. You don't have ample time to really figure out, who's done what, or to have time to really relegate the NFL's process when it comes to COVID testing and showing that this person is clear within a certain time frame, or if they can't quarantine for 2 weeks. Now you really have to turn around what these teams are able to do. And in that situation that the Browns don't have the ability to do so, now you're looking at more, chances that the Browns are going to be without significant impact starters again along their offense because of what they have in terms of the COVID testing. So, hopefully the Browns with Kevin Stefanski, Andrew Berry, Jimmy and Dee Haslam, they can figure out some way that this organization can really change around the policies, at least through the playoffs, because now you've really played a full season with limited negative impacts of COVID on this team already. Now you want to be able to build and continue to have a successful season, which you've been able to do in a pandemic, and a COVID infected offseason, and a COVID affected training camp, in a season where players have been out, where injuries have negatively impacted the team, and you've still been able to find success. And now you're sitting at 10-4. With a win and some help, you have an opportunity to clinch a playoff berth this week. Now you have to, identify to your team, this is what we have. This is the opportunity that we can take advantage of and change this franchise around. You haven't been to the playoffs since 2002. This is your first winning season since 2007 when you went 10-6. You have a great opportunity to go 12-4 and have your best record that you've had in decades. Personal accountability is what is going to make the difference between what the Browns have in terms of their talent that's available in the playoffs due to COVID and health, It's all going to come down to personal responsibility and how important this opportunity to play in the playoffs and turn around this franchise is to the player individually and the people that's around them. Are they willing to put themselves in a bubble for the sake of the team and for the sake of this opportunity to really change the narrative? And that's something that remains to be seen from this team. Again, the Cleveland Browns Tailgate Show is sponsored by Focus Clothing. Focus Clothing is a small Black-owned apparel company here in Cleveland, Ohio. They do have new apparel out on their website. Make sure you guys go check it out. They have premium fabric, black and white pullover sweaters with a new Focus Friends logo. It is a hot topic right now. You guys should definitely check it out. Their apparel is already flying off the shelves with this new apparel. Make sure you shop today at focusclothingcle.com. Also, you can follow them on social media at focusclothingcle.com.
Who said that t-shirt was only for the summer?
Again, I want to thank you guys so much for joining me for the Browns Tailgate Show. I'm just going ahead and share out the stream one more time as we get into our final topics of the show. Again, the Cleveland Browns Tailgate Show is brought to you by Sports Illustrated Browns Digest. You can check out the site every day for team news, game day threads, and featured content led by lead editor Pete Smith. And also, I'm a contributing writer along with Brandon Little. You guys can join me today at 1 o'clock for the live game day thread where I update the website based off anything in terms of an update regarding the game, whether it be injuries, drives, and also adding my personal commentary in there as well. Be sure to check that out at si.com/NFL/Browns. And let's go ahead and get right back into it. Again, kickoff will be at 1 o'clock. So now in the situation, how can the Browns clinch a playoff berth in Week 16? One of the things that they needed was potentially a loss by Miami against the Oakland Raiders. Obviously, Ryan Fitzmagic, because he's no longer Ryan Fitzpatrick, the man with the beard, the man with the swag, the man that had his whole face mask and helmet turned around, was able to complete a pass with 7 seconds left. They got down the field, 4 seconds, kicked the game-winning field goal, and the Raiders basically eliminated themselves out of the playoffs. And shout out to my man, Mark Bradley. I had texted him last night. He's an Oakland Raiders fan. We did have him on the Tailgate Show early in the season on a special edition on a Thursday where we actually talked throughout the whole show, which was great. Again, the Raiders had got eliminated. And in that situation, now the Browns need some different help in terms of getting into the playoffs. They would need either a Baltimore or Tennessee loss on top of a win this week. And again, looking at the New York Jets, this was potentially an easy win just because of looking what they had at their roster. This game is no longer a gimme just because of what the Browns are already missing. You look at the fact that they're missing up to potentially 3 linebackers. You have 4 receivers on the COVID reserve list. B.J. Goodson, your starting Mike linebacker, is out of this game because of also being on a reserve COVID list alongside linebacker Jacob Phillips. Malcolm Smith is listed as questionable. And then you have 2 starting offensive linemen and Wyatt Teller, who's out with the ankle injury, and then also Jedrick Wills, who's going to be out likely, and then Kendall Lamb stepping into that starting lineup. Now you're in a situation where the Browns have to perform this week in order to clinch that playoff berth. Now, in the situation that the Steelers beat the Colts, that's pretty much going to guarantee that the Browns get into the playoffs, that game alone. Because with that allows them to win the division. It pushes the Colts down. And then in the situation that Baltimore wins, that puts them likely into that playoff spot just because of their record. And they're going to have a tiebreaker with the Colts, but them having a better division record could likely be the reason why they get into the playoffs. And then obviously the Baltimore Ravens in the playoffs at that 7th seed at 11-5 is scary, but it's likely not a situation that you're going to see the Browns play the Ravens unless they win the division. Now, winning the division is still something that is possible because the Bengals somehow won against the Pittsburgh Steelers. That wasn't something that I thought was likely, just given what situation the Bengals were in, not having Joe Burrow. But really, it showed that the Steelers aren't as good of a team as we thought they were. Now, early in the season, they did have good wins against the Browns, the Titans, and the Ravens. But now you're looking at the situation where a lot of those close wins against an easy schedule is starting to show up. Now, do I believe it's going to be unlikely that they lose out the rest of the season? I really do. They're just because Mike Tomlin and what he's been able to do with this team for such a long time period, I just don't see them losing out for the rest of the season. No matter how much us as just Browns fans, we want to see them lose. At the end of the day, you have to keep a realistic mindset that this is an NFL team and they want to perform at the highest level, and no player just wants to lose every single game. So in that situation, they're either going to win the Colts game or the Browns game. Now, if I had to pick one of the two, obviously being a Browns fan, you want to see them beat the Colts and then the Browns beat them in week 17 and use that momentum, going to the playoffs. Because you are in a situation where you've lost to the Ravens twice and then you've lost to the Steelers earlier in the season. In that situation, you don't really want to go into the playoffs with a loss. You want to go into the playoffs with a win, because that momentum, that confidence carries over. Regardless if you win the division or not, the Browns are extremely likely. They have over an 88% chance to make the playoffs. One or two things need to happen. They need a win and they need some help. If you win out, that guarantees you a playoff spot regardless. So that's two games where you basically just have to win and you have your spot. If the Steelers beat the Colts, you're guaranteed to get in now, week 16, today. In that situation, you want the Browns to be the team that beats the Steelers if they only can win one of two games, because you need that confidence. We haven't been there. 18 years, the Browns haven't been in the playoffs. In a situation that you're going into playoffs, you need as much momentum as possible. Any professional sport, momentum is key. When you have that confidence of knowing, we've beat the Steelers, we've beat the top team in our division. No, we didn't beat the Baltimore Ravens, but we at least showed 2 weeks ago that we can be competitive, and you played down really to the last snap against that team. Competitiveness is what we've wanted to see out of the Browns for a long time against top-level competition. You look at their losses. The Baltimore Ravens in week 1, the team just wasn't really prepared, really wasn't ready. It was a shortened offseason. It was Kevin Stefanski's first game. What could you say? They needed some time. The Steelers game was another game where you have a top-level competitor within your own division that have veterans, that have a good defense, and really know how to take advantage of that matchup because of good coaching. The Oakland Raiders, where we thought they were a better team than they were, but they're still the Raiders. But in that situation, they got out-coached with John Gruden, understanding it's a bad weather game. We're going to run the ball, and they were the more physical team. And then you look at their fourth loss of the season, again, against the Baltimore Ravens, and it was their ability to step up in a big-time moment and their defense's inability to limit Lamar Jackson, whether it be it with his arm or with his leg. The 4 games you've lost, you either got blown out, out-coached, or you just didn't make enough plays. All the things that you've needed to do in terms of the teams you should beat, because you can only play who's on your schedule, you've done. You're 10-4. You've proven we can win. We can compete at the highest level. And now you're in a situation where you have one team that's pretty much playing for draft position and another team that's trying to win this division if they don't win next week. If I had to choose, I want to beat the team that's already beaten me, that's a guaranteed playoff team, and you can prove that you're at the top level. Heading into the playoffs, you need that momentum. You're already missing players. You don't know who's going to, potentially have an injury or what's going to happen with these COVID tests. Take as much as you can with the positivity of winning week 17, get rested up, and play your butt off in that wild card matchup. That's what we need from the Browns. Now we look at which teams could potentially be the best matchup in the playoffs. We all know that the Kansas City Chiefs are going to win the number 1 seed and have the bye week and play in the divisional round. That's pretty much a guarantee. If I'm being honest, there's really only one team that I don't want to see in the playoffs, at least for the first week, and that's the Buffalo Bills. The Buffalo Bills are one of those teams that are going to be a Super Bowl contender. Josh Allen is playing at a high level. The offense overall, they spread the ball around. They can run it with success. They're extremely well-disciplined and well-coached with Sean McDermott at the helm. And then also that defense is top-notch. That's a team I would not want to play in the first week. Now, if we're looking at the AFC South, it's extremely likely they're going to bring 2 teams in the playoffs, being the Tennessee Titans and the Indianapolis Colts. The Colts with that defense could beat anybody on a weekly basis. We've beat them earlier in the season, and really the biggest question mark on that Indianapolis Colts team is going to be and remain Phillip Rivers, just because you don't know what you're going to get out of him. We haven't seen too many situations where he's with the Chargers where he needed to step up in a big-time moment, and he did it on a consistent basis. Now, the Chargers I'm not even going to say were. They are an organization that just finds some way to lose, even in situations where they should win. The Colts obviously are a more disciplined organization, but we've even seen it with their time with Andrew Luck. Yes, they did run into Tom Brady and the New England Patriots and Bill Belichick, but since Peyton Manning has left that organization, they haven't been able to get over the hump in terms of the playoffs, and who knows what they're going to get out of Phillip Rivers. Would I rather play them than the Tennessee Titans? I would. Now, some people may think, well, the Browns have already blown out the Tennessee Titans. Why would you not want that matchup again? Here's my reasoning. The Browns scored on every single offensive drive they had in the first half, and they had 1 field goal. You were up 38-7 and somehow only won the game by 5 points coming out of the second half. There were 2 possessions in a row where the Tennessee Titans scored in under 4 plays because of what the secondary lacks, and that's really confidence and consistent play on the back end. Some of that comes down to play calling with Joe Woods and the scheme that he runs. Some of it comes down to lack of personnel. But the Cleveland Browns are in a situation where your defense, you're already missing players from injury. You understand that you have a deficit when it comes to personnel. You can't afford to play against a team that has a similar play style as you when it comes to running the ball, controlling time of possession, that have they're a decent defense in Tennessee, not the best, but their offense has a skill set that does not match up well against the Browns. Play action. We have a lot of undisciplined players on the Browns defense, and play action is what killed this team. A.J. Brown, a top receiver. In a situation that Denzel Ward isn't at full health, he can really find a way to beat this team. Corey Davis, he was a former, top 5 pick. Now, has he been the, greatest receiver in the world for the Tennessee Titans? Not really, but he's still a player that was able to find success against the Browns. So in this situation that we're looking at the best matchups, you want to see I don't really see the Dolphins really finding their way all the way up to the 5th seed, unless there's an imploding by the Titans or the Colts. But I would really say the Colts may likely be, even though they're going to be one of the toughest matchups, I would probably say they're the best matchup right now based off of the playoff rankings of the team that you want to face. Now, looking at this matchup again this week, because you want to take this 1 week at a time, and all this playoff talk doesn't matter if they don't win this week. Some matchups you want to see. Obviously, the biggest one is going to be the Browns receivers versus the Jets cornerbacks. Marvin Hall, Derek Willis, these are some players that you need to step up because you don't have a lot of options. Taywan Taylor at that receiving core. If you're able to find success with your receivers, this could really help turn the tide on what they're able to do and how they're able to grow within this offense and find success this week against a weaker Jets team. But in the situation that these high-risk contacts continue into next week, you need these players to feel confident within this offensive scheme to really, grow, be able to at least step up against the Pittsburgh Steelers if any of Jarvis Landry, Kadero Hodge, Rashard Higgins, or Donovan Peoples-Jones is not able to go next week. And then also the tight ends. The tight ends, again, is going to be a group that you're going to have to rely on heavily, not just this week, but all the way through the playoffs. Harrison Bryant has had some fumbling issues this season. You feel confident in him. You drafted him in the 4th round, even though you already had David Njoku pick up his 50-year option. You believe he's the best route runner of the team. He's a rookie. He's had some significant impact already. Now you want to see him be able to step up in big moments and really be disciplined and not make, bad plays. Austin Hooper, at the time, you made him the highest paid tight end in the NFL in the offseason before other contracts were given out. You need him to step up in the playoffs. This week is going to be that situation where Austin Hooper makes consistent plays throughout the game, extends drives, get first downs, get in the end zone. Something we haven't seen a lot of that tight end group is them getting in the end zone consistently. Now we need to see that from them. And I believe they have the talent and the ability to do so. So now we look at the 3 keys for the Browns for them to win this game. And it's going to be a pretty simple one for me this week. 1, play a clean game. No injuries, no turnovers, no stupid penalties. Play a clean game as much as possible. Play discipline and allow yourself to carry over momentum heading into week 17, which will probably be the most important matchup on your schedule. 2, the tight ends step up and help overcome the deficit that you have at wide receiver. You need it not only for this week, you need it for next week, you need it for the playoffs. You need the tight end group as a whole to step up and play to their potential. They haven't done it much this season, and they need to do so starting now. Lastly, the defense forces turnovers. We've seen it against the bad competition. You get Ronnie Harrison back from injury. He's no longer on injured reserve. You get Denzel Ward coming back from that calf injury. Now you have Terrence Mitchell returning at the number 2 and Kevin Johnson returning in the slot. Andrew Sandejo is now off of injury reserve, or not injury reserve, but he's off the injury out of concussion protocol. You want to see him and Carl Joseph step up and become, more consistent on that 3rd level. Carl Joseph has been relatively well in terms of the run game and providing run support out of that 3rd level spot as a box safety. He understands this is the role I've excelled in, and this is what I have to do. Now you need to create turnovers. One of the reasons why the Steelers have had so much success this season, especially against bad teams, is their ability to get after the quarterback and to force turnovers. It starts this week to do it in the upcoming weeks. This game isn't just about the Jets. This game is about week 17 against the Steelers and really about what you're going to get out of this team in the playoffs. It's no longer, we have next year if they don't perform well in the playoffs. This isn't a team that I expect to win the Super Bowl, but this is the team that you want to see take the next step. It's not only just about making the playoffs. It's about stepping up, playing discipline, playing clean, and playing up to the level of your competition in the playoffs as well. If you don't win a close game in the playoffs, that's fine. It happens all the time. But the last thing you want to see from this team, see from this Browns organization, is for them to get to the playoffs and get blown out. That's the last thing you want to see. So it starts this week. Establish your identity on offense. Run the ball with success. Be disciplined. Block regardless of who's in the starting offensive lineup group. On defense, tackle consistently. Force turnovers and get pressure on the quarterback. If you can't do it against the worst teams in the NFL, don't expect to do it against the best teams in the NFL. All right. Well, I would like to thank you guys again for joining me for the Cleveland Browns Tailgate Show. We will be back next week with multiple guests. Again, the Browns are knocking on the door for their first playoff berth since 2002. I'm excited. I hope you're excited. Make sure you guys give me a follow on social media at SHWN Stevenson on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. And lastly, my score prediction for this game, I have the Browns winning a 31-10 game. Browns 31, Jets 10. Browns carry this momentum to week 17 and clinch, hopefully this week in week 16. Thank you guys so much. Make sure you check out the live game thread over on Sports Illustrated Browns Digest, and I'll see you guys next week.